I hope you can hear me. I'm not sure if you can see me, but a very warm welcome from Washington, D.C. My name is Ian McPherson. I'm an education specialist with the GPE Secretariat. We're very excited to be holding this webinar. It's been a huge technological challenge. We have various offices patched in to make the presentations over the course of the 90 minutes from Kampala, Montreal, Dakar, Kathmandu, Paris, as well as DC. So the first point I'd like to make is please do ensure that your microphones are muted throughout the webinar, unless and until the presenters are making an input. So I just want to take 2 very brief minutes to introduce the GPE webinar series before I hand over to my colleague to discuss the actual topic of today. The webinar series was launched in May of this year, and based on the demand expressed by our partners, principally our developing country partners, for additional opportunities for knowledge and good practice exchange. And the monthly series aims to foster and drive knowledge exchange and the sharing of good practice across and through the global partnership, and therefore support the realization of the partnership's strategic goals as well as national and global objectives. The webinar series is part of a broader portfolio of knowledge and practice tools and instruments that GPE provides to amplify its work and the work of its partners in a broader effort to strengthen the implementation of SDG 4 and showcase innovations and good practices taking place at country and global level. So this is the 4th webinar in the series. The first, held in May, was on the Global Book Fund. The second was on early childhood care and education. And the third, last month's webinar, was hosted in collaboration with the Education Commission and focused on the early findings and recommendations of the Commission's report. As a continuation of the financing theme, today's webinar focuses on national education accounts, a methodology designed to assist countries to improve national reporting systems on education finance flows. To provide more detail and introduce the presenter and facilitator of today's webinar and discussion, I'll hand over in a second to my colleague and moderator, Rafael Martinez, who is Senior Education Specialist at GPE based in Washington, who leads the Secretariat work on education planning, system strengthening, and finance. Before I do that, I have 5 technological and housekeeping notes that are very important to share. First is to repeat, please mute your microphones and or telephones during the presentations to avoid any disruptions. And may I ask you also to remove any mobile phones from nearby your computers, which can also interfere. The second one is that if you have any connection problems, please email the webinar account, which is webinars@globalpartnership.org. The third point is to note that this session is being recorded and there will be follow-up materials sent and distributed afterwards. The fourth point is that for those who are connected via WebEx through their computers or mobile phones, if you have any questions for the presenters, please send them using the chat function on WebEx and send it to GPE Secretariat. You will see a scroll down, a drop-down menu to the right of the screen. It is alphabetical. Please email or chat your questions to GPE Secretariat only, not to everybody. And we here, our colleague Umed, will forward your questions to the facilitator who is moderating the questions remotely from Paul de Dakar in Senegal. Just to note that there will be presentations followed by a Q&A session towards the end of the 90 minutes. And finally, to our presenters and the facilitators, when you are asked to speak, we will prompt you to unmute yourselves. So once again, a very warm welcome to us, whether it's morning, evening, afternoon. We're very excited to have actually the largest number of participants. We have at least 120 people joining us for this. So I hope you will find it interesting and enjoyable. And with that, I will pass over to my colleague, Rafael.
Thank you, Jan, for your introductory remarks. My turn to welcome everyone to this webinar, which sounds definitely promising. Like you just said, Jan, we have a very large audience today, which speaks for the general interest in education financing. The issue of education financing has become central in international discussions, in particular in relation with SDG 4 implementation. And as Ian just mentioned, this is the main focus of the Education Commission's report, which will be launched next month in New York. Financing education effectively and tracking resource flows is a major concern for GPE, and is one of the reasons that Chair of the GPE Board of Directors, Giulio Gillard, is also a commissioner on the Education Commission. At an operational level, the GPE current funding model features a number of key requirements at system level for funding robust education sector plan, and as part of this model, GPE promotes effective dialogue around increased domestic financing for education and greater external aid predictability. To this end, and as part of the GPE-funded global and regional activities initiative that support research, capacity development, and knowledge sharing in areas of persistent education challenges, such as education financing, UNESCO Institute for Statistics US, the International Institute for Educational Planning IIP, and the IIP Pôle de Dakar have been implementing a collaborative project which aimed at improving national reporting systems on education finance flows in 8 countries since 2013. The pilot countries include Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea, Nepal, Laos, Senegal, Uganda, Vietnam, and Zimbabwe. As a comprehensive information system of education financing flows, the national education accounts capture and consolidate funding from all sources, whether they're from government, private sector, households, and donors, the producing units, public and private schools, university, training centers as examples, and economic transactions like salaries, other current expenditures such as teaching materials, infrastructure, etc. And they cover all levels of education from pre-primary to tertiary education within a coherent accounting framework. With the Education 2030 agenda in full swing, there's a growing recognition of the need for quality financing data. NEAs can offer considerable insight into the tracking of resources to illuminate where, how, and by whom education is funded and who benefits. So the objectives of the webinar today will be to provide an overview of the NEA methodology developed and implemented by the 2 UNESCO institutes, to share country-level experiences of the process of building a national education account, and we'll have Nepal and Uganda presenting on that, and to also provide an understanding on the benefits and uses of the data generated through NEA for informing policy-making processes, reporting, accountability, etc. I'm going to introduce our presenters today, and I'm very delighted to have with us Mr. Ousmane Diouf, who's an expert in planning, budgeting, and financial management at UNESCO IIP Paris. And Ousmane has been leading the NEA development activities in Uganda, Senegal, and Laos. All right, so for the first presentation, joining Ousmane, Saïd Vofal, program specialist at US Montreal, will be joining him. Saïd is responsible for the supervision of the US program on education finance, which includes the NEA project. The second presentation will be, so Ousmane and Saïd will be introducing the NEA approach, the methodology. The second presentation will be done by Mr. Dhruv Baraj Regmi, Chief of Planning of the Program and Budget section in the Ministry of Education of the Government of Nepal. Mr. Regmi will present the process of developing an NEA at country level and its application and usages. The last presentation will be done by Mr. Nelson Wanambi, Chief Economist, Head of the Budget section in the Ministry of Education and Sport of the Government of Uganda, and Mr. Samuel Ichoku, Principal Statistician, Head of the National Accounts section in the Ugandan Bureau of Statistics. We also have connected today Jean-Claude Ndabanier, Education Policy Analyst at the IAP Pôle de Dakar, who will be moderating the question and answer session. Jean-Claude has been providing technical support to the establishment of the NEAs in Zimbabwe, Guinea, and Uganda. All of our program specialists in US and IAP Pôle de Dakar have also been contributing to the elaboration of a methodological guidelines on NEA. Joining the session today, we also have in the room here in DC, Ayaki Bezaki, who is a Senior Education Specialist and GPE Country Lead for Nepal. And we have Mr. Tariq Khan, who's a Senior Country Lead for other countries, but also representing GPE Secretariat as a focal point for the NEA grants. I will turn to Usman and Said for starting with the first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rafaela, for the introduction. I think you introduced very well the rationale of the whole work around the National Education Account and the justification, and why it's so important in the context of the international education goals, such as the SDG and Education 2030. So data on education finance and expenditure are essential for effectively addressing critical education policy questions. So this data help decision makers to determine the financial feasibility of achieving international goals such as global goal such as education, Sustainable Development Goal 4 and Education 2030. So my colleague Usman and myself will briefly give you an overview of the NEA methodology that was developed by the three UNESCO partners, UNESCO Institute for Statistics, International Institute for Education Planning, Pôle de Dakar, and with the financial support of the Global Partnership for Education. As you know, the education finance are critical to achieving sustainable development goals such as SDG 4 and Education 2030. There is a specific indicator about financing in the thematic Education 2030 framework for action, which is education expenditure per student by level of education and source of funding. So this implies that in order to monitor the indicator related to the financing in the new SDG, it is very important to have a robust and complete data on the financing. But despite the importance, the critical importance of the finance data, one can see is that the availability at international level is currently insufficient. So in this chart, one can see that currently in the recent years, based on the data reported the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, who is the responsible for the collecting this data at international level, only around 50% of countries are able to provide data on public expenditure on education. And this share is even very low when it's come to compare to household expenditure, which is very important also. This share is only 20%. So, and when it comes to the international expenditure on education, only 30% of countries are able to report data on this. So this gives you the magnitude of the huge gap in terms of data gaps in terms of the financing. And in order to improve data availability and at both national and international level, the three UNESCO components with the financial support of GPE launched in 2013 a very ambitious project to improve the coverage of the data, but also to develop the national education account methodology, which was used before in some countries, but we didn't have an international guide with the methodology, complete methodology on the national education account, which country can use to compile and organize the information in a way that could be used by policymakers. So in the context of this project, the three UNESCO organizations work with 8 countries. These 8 countries were divided in 3 for a stream of work, if you wish. So Guinea and Zimbabwe focused on public resource allocation within the system, documenting how resources to education are used in order to examine potential problems of efficiency and equity in the distribution of public resources. Vietnam and Cote d'Ivoire work on household expenditure. Senegal and Laos work on the information on the external funding of education. And two countries, Nepal and Uganda, work to fully implement a national education account methodology that was developed. Also based on that work, the methodological guide was developed and by the UNESCO. So now, without much ado, I will give the floor to my colleague Usman, who will present you an overview of the methodology itself, of the methodology of NEA. And I will come back later to close this session on the presentation of NEA. Thank you very much. Usman?
Okay, and now for the origin of NEAs. In almost each country in the globe, there is a National Bureau of Statistics who developed what we so-called national account. And this national account measures the whole economic activities of a country for planning, development purposes, and budgeting for the economy of the whole country. And more often, this national account does not give details on sectors which make the economy itself. And whenever planners would like to have a detailed analysis of, for example, education sectors or health sectors, they face challenges to be able to know how much they would put for education planners. And this is how satellite account emerged for health sectors, national for education, agriculture, and other sectors. And as this national accounts gives aggregates for all expenditures, the national satellite accounts try to give details expenditures on development purposes for educational planning. And how national education account works. It organized all the financing flows to the education sectors in a coherent framework of dimension of interest. The most important dimensions are the financing units, which reflect those who fund for education but doesn't provide it. The production units, it means education institutions, administrative offices, for example, by level of education, and the activities in the education sectors, like general administration organization, for example, the teaching activities, the ancillary services, and then economic transaction, like teaching, staff compensation, teaching and learning materials, other goods and services, and ancillary services themselves. This is flexible. It means we do not necessarily stick to these 5 dimensions. Some countries may have interest to look at the strategic programs they have to be able to know how much is spent by strategic program for monitoring and evaluation needs, for example. And the national education account gives the flexibility for those countries to put, for example, strategic planning programs in the dimensions they have. And to do this, we have normally 5 main steps. The first one is to look at the financing mechanisms of the country, to be able to define the framework, to map the financial flows, and make a classification of all sources of funding itself, and also the education institutions. And the next step would be the data collection, which will look at the source of data identified on the first step to be able to know where are the information from the financing units themselves, like governments, development partners, and also the private sectors. And look at also the education institutions, the schools, public, private, and all type of education to be able to know the funds they are collected, how they use it, and where they keep the information. And this step allows us to design methodology that can help to collect all information using the NEA systems at the Ministry of Education and also the National Bureau of Statistics systems. And the third step is now the data processing. After collecting all this information, we need to organize them in financing tables in a very coherent framework respecting the 5 dimensions we have already defined, and combine it with the income and expenditure tables for the production units, like schools and education institutions in general. Normally, the funds they receive, they spend it, let's say, in a different way, which is not reflected in the allocation of the financing tables itself. And this step will allow us to have financing tables for the funding units and also have income and expenditure for the production unit to be able to reconcile and consolidate all the financing itself and the usage at the education institution level. And that will give us the final tables we have for the NEA to be able to have a coherent framework which will show how much is spent by each of these education institutions, where the funds comes, and what is the spending for each level of education to be able to calculate the unit costing, for example, and also have some analysis on some aggregates we need for planning and also for international benchmarking. And the last step would be the dissemination and analysis, where we try to respond to some basic questions. Not only these 5 questions NEA respond, but also link it to the planning of countries, and also try to make sure partners, civil societies, and government are aware of the actual expenditure level in the education sector. Thank you very much, Sai. I give you back the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Usman. For one of the big incentives of the NEA is to have a complete coverage of the finance, the finance from all sources of financing. So when we collect funding data from as many sources as possible within the NEA framework, that change completely the picture of in terms of the financing. So I just will show you a very compelling slide on comparing the data expenditure on education as percent of GP in GDP in 4 countries before and after the NEA exercise. You can see that there is a huge difference between the figures before and after doing an NEA. For example, before the NEA, one may think that Uganda and Nepal are able to spend less than Cote d'Ivoire and Vietnam in this figure. But it's completely the opposite, actually. So when the NEA exercise is taken fully implemented in these countries, the figure has increased tremendously because we have a more exhaustive coverage of the source of funding, including private as well as international expenditure. We have also UNESCO after this project will need to so the project of course led to a tremendous number of outputs that are goes from framework of and classification, complete NEA databases for all countries, consolidation and estimation methods, organization and institutionalization of the exercise that was conducted in these countries, and the most importantly, one agreed methodological guide to estimate household expenditure on education from household survey, and the methodological NEA guide itself. So sustainability is a big issue regarding NEA because it's a huge exercise, it's costly, and so it's very important to follow up on the work that the UNESCO in partnership with the GPE has conducted. So we have already started of ways of sustaining the exercise by following up with the 8 countries with which we have worked, disseminating the NEA methodology through regional workshops conducted by UNESCO in Asia, in Africa, and building also linkages between NEA methodology and other surveys and studies, such as the BOOST survey, the CSR, country status report, the public expenditure review, and how also to facilitate the completion of the reporting of international statistics from the NEA exercise using UNESCO questionnaire. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Said and Usman, for this overview of the NEA methodology and the benefits of developing NEAs at country level. So we'll follow with country experiences, practical experiences of establishing NEAs. And I'm calling on Mr. Regmi. Mr. Regmi, are you here? Are you connected? And Shelandra has been part of the UIS team working with Nepal in the establishment of the NEA. Shelandra, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Actually, I'm presenting on behalf of Mr. Regmi because he faced some technical problem. But the presentation was jointly developed, and based on his input, some of the aspects are revised last night also. So what Saeed and Usman have mentioned, that the project was started in September 2013, and the government decided to participate on 17th September, and they form a technical committee. Technical committee bringing people from planning section, people from finance administration section, and from Central Bureau of Statistics, and the Ministry of Finance also. And they have also invited UNESCO Kathmandu and UNESCO National Commission. But again, there was a change in the technical committee. It had changed 3 times. And again, the policy planning and program section, which is the Mr. Regmi's section. But the Mr. Regmi is a third coordinator. There was the first one, and he moved. There was another one, I think, even not 4. One was for only 1 or 2 months. Then the financial administration sections, there was 2 different persons, and section officer policy planning programs, who was continued from the beginning. And the statistician from Central Bureau of Statistics, a person who continued from the beginning to end of the project. And the 2 colleagues from Ministry of Finance. And later on, they have also added a colleague from the Department of Education, which is under Ministry of Education, a colleague from EMIS department. And Nepal didn't have a official steering committee, but whenever we have a mission to Nepal, we would brief him, and then kept informed and validated the various steps to the project. Every time, whenever we have a mission, we would organize a preliminary findings with the Ministry of Education and other relevant stakeholders. The technical team, the technical team mainly did the data mapping, identify the gaps and the possible solution, and collect documents, report data, etc. And we also meet the partners with other stakeholders, Central Bureau of Statistics, National Planning Commission, Ministry of Education, other NGOs, and we also did a field visit to understand the fund flow and what kind of fund they get, and from the Ministry of Education, from the NGO, and the local government, like a District Development Committee and the Village Development Committee. Village Development Committee is the lowest administrative unit of Nepal. And then the compiling, processing, and the consolidating the data. And because like IAP colleague was also there with us, and from Montreal, one of my colleagues also participated. So we 3 of us bring also of the international experiences, how other countries are doing. And the sharing the preliminary findings in each mission, and definitely we also organize the final findings workshop. And we did a constant interaction with the development partners, seniors in the MOE, Central Bureau of Statistics, on the findings regularly, so that they don't see the last finding as a surprise. That's why it was a good lesson for Nepalese dish. And the main sources what we use, that's the Ministry of Finance. Every year they publish a book called Red Book, which is the allocation and the expenditure data. And they also publish a technical assistance book based on which is not reflected in the main budgetary support, but the technical support they also publish, and it includes the technical support from the development partners as well as the NGOs and INGOs, and the report of Association of International NGOs. International NGO have a organization which publish yearly data on their expenditure, and there is a ratio of 80-20. And the district development reports that every district, Nepal has 75 districts, and 75 districts has published a report mentioning how much money they receive from NGO, how much money they have received from INGO and from the government. And they, for the first time, luckily, actually, we're lucky that they published a report which was sent to the central government, to the Ministry of Foreign Federal Affairs and Local Development. We managed to collect this data. And we also use household survey, Nepal Living Standard Survey, measurement survey, and EMIS data. And luckily, the Central Bureau of Statistics was also doing a private school survey to understand the fee structures and other expenditure, income and expenditure of private schools. The schools means not only like covering the school, but the technical and vocational institutions also. And we also collected the all the public institutions audited reports from the colleges and the technical and vocational institutions. Process, how we did, like Usman, how he has presented the same way, like a mapping of the fund flow, how the mapping of the financing modality process. And to make it our job easy, we prepared a 40 different folders on different topics, like central government expenditure, higher education, technical and vocational education, community school in Nepal. The public school is called community school, and then household, general information, etc. And we have given a task to each members of the technical committee to take care of something, like CBS was more responsible for their own survey, and then the EMIS was also responsible for respective related to their own work, and the technical coordinator was also responsible for something. And the work done under the specific topic was stored and opted in the regularly, including the raw data, like whatever we would collect from the red book, technical book, household survey, we would put in the specific folders. And if there is additional data needed, then technical committee member would collect and discuss. That's where we can get it, or we can get it, and what will be the alternative modality. And during the UIS IAP mission, a workshop would be organized every time, and every technical committee members would work on their respective areas. And the main work of the technical team, what we have the technical committee work together with us, identify the possible sources of data. That's where the data is located, how we can collect it, and then how reliable the data is. And identify the disaggregating methodology by label activities. Sometimes that's a technical report, which the Ministry of Finance published. It was not available, so we will discuss that's how we can disaggregate it and process the data to make it compatible with the NEA tables, and communicate. We also communicate with the local partners regularly, that's UNICEF, World Bank, and those who are providing technical and financial support in school education of Nepal, and definitely other related ministries also. And they also wrote some of the chapter in the report. And the dissemination of results, the final dissemination was done in 15th July 2016. The ministry and the secretary, like included in the forward and the preface. The secretary released the final NEA report. Most of the joint secretaries, level officials from the ministries and the related, like the National Planning Commission, Ministry of Finance, technical and vocational institutions were present. All development partners supporting MOE like World Bank, ADB, USAID, UNICEF was also present. The good news is that most of the academia and the development partners well received the report, and there was a wide coverage of media of the findings of the NEA. Based on my discussion with Mr. Redney, that once we release that, how now it will help to start the policy dialogue with the government. And what the colleague was mentioning, that it wasn't really on time. That the government was developing SSDP, the School Sector Development Plan. They also used the preliminary findings of the NEA. Then there is a upcoming higher education reform project. They are also using this information. And the one of the interesting thing, I was also in the workshop, the people who are saying that now we are moving toward federal mechanism. The report is very useful, how to utilize, how we can account, and how we can make it even transferable, accountable, and transparent on the education financing. And government has recently revised the Education Act. Now Ministry of Education is busy to develop the new education regulation, and the information available in NEA is very useful for them. And the 14th plan, which will start from 2017, and the approach paper is already developed, and they are also extensively using the findings of the NEA report. I think the challenges one was definitely it's a readiness, the capacity in terms of commitment, what we will do, how it will be utilized at the initial phase, and the data source and the mapping was a really huge challenge. It was not that easy to get all the information at one go. It was spread over in many ministries, many INGOs, and the collaboration support. It was at the initial phase and the middle phase, data collection from different sectors. We identified, but the problem is like whether it was not under the Ministry of Education. Sometimes, in many cases, it was outside the Ministry of Education, how to approach and how to collect the data. And again, once we collect the data, whether it is reliable or not, how to validate these data. And definitely it's a continuation of the technical personnel, like I told you at the beginning, that they changed the 3 technical coordinators, and other staffs are also changed. And the analysis, definitely that was one of the challenge, opportunity also. Now, like a credibility and acceptance of the result. We're locked. What I see from the reflection in the workshop, the acceptance level is really high. And one of the things, like Said has also mentioned, that the implication, the sustainability, and making it a regular exercise within the ministry is one of the challenges. And how the ministry is thinking to overcome these challenges. Most of the colleagues, most of the participants, most of the people, officials who we interacted with say that it was really eye-opening exercise. That's how much money households are spending, how much money the government is putting. Like Said was presenting, it was around 3%, 3 to 2.5% of GDP was expense. But when we put all sources, it went to more than 9%. And that was definitely eye-opening. And then they started how. Then when we explained, I think the acceptance level is really high among the policymaker. And it provided the directives of accountability, transparency, and standardization from all the stakeholders. For example, everybody was saying that, okay, NGO is putting this much of money, INGO is this much of money. Once we started, sharing the information, NGO and other ministry also started thinking like how, like we can make it more transferable, whatever they are putting into education, and how they can standardize the data collection and the reporting format. We see the strong political commitment from the ministers and the secretaries forward and the professors. And definitely that the ministry also want to have a continuation of technical team, enhancing, updating capacity of the technical team. And they want to continue this technical team. Government also allocated some money from their own to continue this exercise. And they also expected a strong technical backup from UIS and IAP. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elandra, for your presentation on behalf of Mr. Regmi. It's been a very practical presentation, very helpful, and also thank you for the transparency and openness into stating the challenges that the team meets. I think it's of value for any country who wants to launch any type of any activity. I'm turning to Nelson and Samuel now from Uganda. We're 10 minutes late, but please use the 10 minutes for your presentation, and we'll see how to get back on time with the Q&A session.
Good afternoon.
We can't hear you, I'm afraid. Can you check that you are unmuted, please? There we go. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Uganda, the two of us, myself, Sam Echoku, and my colleague, Mr. Nelson Wanabi, will be presenting. I'll be presenting the first part, and I hope we shall make up for the time lost. In the outline of our presentation.
Can you please upload the slides? You can be sharing your slides so we can all see them.
I'll continue as they upload the slide. I'll give the introduction and then the process of building the NEA in Uganda. In the introduction, Uganda has conducted a global study of the NEA that involved the collection, processing, and the analysis of the funding and expenditure of all internal and external actors of the education system. The NEA development process, in our case, began in 2013. It involved a series of technical meetings in which we had a total of 7 missions from IEP Paris and then Dakar, Pole, technical support. In the country, we had a team of 10 officers from the Ministry of Education and then from the National Statistics Office, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. In the preparatory stage, we started with the establishment of a strong coordination mechanism between the Ministry of Education and Sports and the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. And also galvanized support. Support was galvanized from the political and the technical leaderships from the 2 institutions. Ranking study levels of the Uganda education system according to the International Standard Classification of Education was done to reclassify them according to the International Standard Classification of Education. And then a review was done of the financial mechanisms and the possible data sources for the education sector for the years under study. The models were then agreed upon on the data collection. In terms of the data collection, processing and validation, the development of the data processing methodologies involved data mining of the publications and the government accounts, as well as the other existing statistical systems such as the household budget surveys and the government finance statistics. And the validation and processing of the collected data and implementation of the financing tables was done by each category of data source, that is external, government and the households, among others. And we did the validation and interpretation of the processed files and the results. Experience sharing by the national NEA team was done during the 1 week workshop in Paris in early mid this year. In the process of building the NEA for Uganda, we also had the stakeholders, dissemination and validation of the NEA. In this process, the internal meetings were done with the leaders, both technical and the political leadership, to discuss and validate the project report. Presentation and comments which we received from the validation meeting we had in June have been incorporated in the draft report. We have integrated the feedback from the workshop to the writing of the final report. The report is currently under final validation for consistency checks by the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, the Methodology and Standards Department. We also had some challenges during the process of compiling the NEA accounts. Particularly, we had difficulties in obtaining some of the financial data, for example, from the private institutions and schools and NGOs, as well as off budget. And this sometimes was mainly due to cooperation issues or lack of one-stop for the data. The exercise was also time-consuming and a tedious task, especially the extraction of financial data from the documents of the approved budget for the 5 years we are studying. And classification of the data to fit the financing table format was also difficult and challenging. Finally, it was challenging to transfer the data from the Uganda classification to the UNESCO classification, especially the data under the tertiary level of education. But we eventually did overcome this and were able to finalize the NEA report. The second bit of this presentation, I pass over now to my colleague, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you so much, Sam. Good afternoon or good morning, my colleagues in Washington and elsewhere. Nelson Wanambi, taking over from my colleague. I'm going to present this part of benefits of building national education accounts in Uganda. Now, after collecting all this information, just as my colleague Osman said, you will note that we collected a lot of information, and this information has revealed a number of things for us that we didn't know. Now, some of this information that was revealed is that we noted that out of the total external financing, about 57% goes to capital development, equivalent to about 1,094 billion Uganda shillings. Now, what again was very good for us to find out is that we discovered that the household contribution to education sector was doing a very good job, because we found out that the households were contributing 57% on average to education expenditure in Uganda. Now, while government is contributing 36%, and you have external financing contributing about 6%, and the funds that are generated from internally generated funds, that is the usage, is about 1%. To us, this was a very good revelation, really. We've also noted that the NEA report has enabled us to calculate the unit costs of education and at various levels. And this is very important information that can inform planning and budgeting process within the education sector with certainty. Most of the expenditure of private institutions is not disclosed. This, we discovered it, and is not readily available or provided by the schools. We also noted that a lot of financial information in terms of budget is not captured in the sector budget. And this gives a bad picture of what the sector has. And yet there is a lot of money in the sector, but we do not know that we have this money. So I think it is very important to capture this information. Also noted that there are major gaps in the financial information on education income and expenditure in schools, both public and private. And within the household expenditure, there is over-aggregated data on some major expenditure, hence obscuring other important expenditure items. The NEA also helps in enhancing evidence-based policy, making for full access to quality education. I think this is very important because we did not have enough data collected, but this now gives us enough information, and we are able to link this information to expenditure and education performance indicators. For example, we linked it to people-teacher ratio, people-classroom ratios, and we saw a correlation, which is a very good thing. It also provides a guide on what constitutes key cost expenditure in education service delivery, which is very good, which you could not see without this NEA and so on. Now, from NEA 2009 to 14, the major funded expenditures of recurrent nature were at about 34%. This is quite big and so on. Now, also note that NEA provides the categorization of education funding by level of education. And in this context, we noted that about 34% to 39% of education budget is provided to primary and secondary, respectively. The NEA also highlights the utilization of funds from the different funding units by the education providers by level and economic nature. This was very good because it went deeper into analyzing various levels. NEA also promotes sustainable financial accounting awareness in the sector. NEA emphasizes the importance of financial record keeping, reporting, and analysis in the sector. Because if you don't keep the records, if you don't do reporting, then you will not have information for NEA. So it gives good lessons. NEA will help the sector to monitor all financial contributions by all financing units and consequently direct them to implement the sector policies and, where possible, identify the market failures to guide government intervention. We also note that NEA education account analysis will help to determine if where education funds are provided are being spent in support of our Vision 2040, and also at whether the time-sliced national development plans are being implemented. And this really is going ahead to help us to do that. Now, the implementation of NEA will also provide a comparable framework for Uganda to measure its progress in education against other countries, since it is an international standard accounting system. And I think this is very important. And this then makes us be comparable, especially when we are now in this era of SDG 4. I think this information is very important for us. For example, in line with the SDG 4, when we computed our GDP, the share of government expenditure on GDP, which is standing at 2%, vis-a-vis the requirement of the protocol that we are supposed to provide at least 4%. This again gives us a good chance to understand where we are. And NEA has also helped us to understand the issue of the contribution of who is contributing much to the GDP. For example, out of the 6.3 of total education expenditure to the GDP, 2% is from government, while 4.3% is from other sectors. This was not there. It is this national education account that has helped us to do this. Now, just as a quick way of some recommendations that we had, for policy recommendations, we are saying that the Ministry of Education needs to come up with the policy recommendations requiring education institutions to regularly provide information on their income and expenditure, because this is very important if we have to have accurate information for the NEA. Then we also need to institutionalize the national education accounts in both the ministry and the UBOS, so that we are able to have this information readily available. That means that we need to plan for it within the ministry and within the UBOS, so that we can collect it and update our NEA on annual basis. Then there is also need to strengthen partnerships with all stakeholders, i.e. private sector, religious bodies, NGOs, in order to get accurate information on the national education accounts. And there is need to support the current education management information system by introducing a module for education financing, which is not available now, and this requires funds. Now, also, once we have this, then we shall have our information clear. The sector should leverage on the already existing arrangements of data collection, e.g. through annual school censuses and surveys, so that we are able to update our information in the NEA reports and so on. There is also need to enhance capacity of the sector staff to effectively implement the collection and processing of national education financial information, because this is a highly technical exercise, but we also want to cascade it down to local governments and districts, so that through our DEMIS, decentralized education management information system, it is ably captured by local governments and passed to the Ministry of Education at the Center for MC Study. Thank you so much, as for now.
Thank you so much, Nelson and Samuel. I think despite the fact that we couldn't see your presentation, what you were speaking, but it was already shared this morning and yesterday, I think it was a very clear presentation, and thank you again for stating some recommendations for future NEA establishment. We're now entering into the Q&A session. Claude, I don't know how many questions we received. Can you tell me how many? Because we're definitely late, so we'll have to check whether or not we can reduce the Q&A session to 30 minutes instead of 45. Do you think that's manageable?
Yes, I think it's going to be manageable to keep the Q&A session for 30 minutes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well. Okay, so let's do that.
Okay, so we have
30 minutes as from now.
Yes. Thank you, GPE, and for hosting this webinar, and many thanks to the presenters and the participants for joining. We are now going to open up for questions and comments from the participants, and a number of you have already submitted questions via chat and emails, and I would like to invite participants to continue sending their questions during this session, because we have enough time to cover all the questions. And I'm going to read a selection of these questions for the presenters to react to. And where possible, I will indicate who the question is from. So who is going to answer the question? So while we have the discussion, you can continue to submit the additional questions. And feel free also to contact the GPE Secretariat if you have any question. So I have grouped the questions into 4 main groups. So the first group is going to be for questions related to methodology, NEA methodology. So there is a question from Zahra that is related to the processes that goes from data collection, processing, and validation, and how we can assure the credibility of data produced by NEA, and how data produced by NEA are different from the collection of any other data collection done by the government, NGOs, development partners. And there is another question from the same participant that says, we found that data at different levels of school, to district, to provinces, to national level, have lots of discrepancies. So how to ensure that the budget, the data produced are correct? That is something that has that is related to data, the accuracy of data produced. So I would like to invite Usman to maybe recall the methodological aspects surrounding this data issue. And after that, I would like to invite Samuel Ichoko from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, so he can tell us how the UBOS is actually working on the validation process. I know that's what they're doing right now, validation process, because of NEA, the data produced through NEA are under the mandate of national offices of statistics. So Usman, the floor is yours, please.
Okay, thank you so very much, Claude. So I think about the methodology, we have mainly 5 steps. So the first one was about mapping all the financing flows by studying the financing mechanisms in the education sectors from education institutions perspective, and also funding units, including government budget at local and central level, as it was in Uganda, and private institutions, mainly household in Uganda, because NGOs, we failed to collect it. It was not available, or they didn't cooperate. We couldn't say like that. And also from development partners also. And from development partners, we also face many challenges, especially when it comes to budget. And after that, the data collection was naturally done. We don't create a parallel system. So when it comes to the credibility, we have the official data, which comes from Minister of Finance, Minister of Education, and UBOS, which was already assured. I think the quality was already assured and credibility. All we have done is some data collection just to complement what was missing on few parts, especially on the education institutions themselves. And after having collected all this information, we worked on the processing. And this processing was mainly about the classification, how to attribute these 5 dimensions we have agreed on to each and every financing flows in the education system from 2009 to 2014, to be able to know each funding flow, the origins, destinations, and what it was used for, the level of education itself, to be able to respond to the financing questions we had. And following also the framework we have designed for the tables, we have developed what we call the financing tables. Each funding unit has a financing table showing the funding itself for each level of education and by fiscal year. And after that, we worked on the education institutions themselves, schools, administration offices, to look at the funds they receive from these funding units, how they use it. And as you will all know, some of the expenditures are not used at the education institution level the way it was allocated. And school grants is the best example we could have. And you will see biggest part or share of the education funding is under other recurrent, because it goes to capitation grant to schools, and when you go to school, it pays for water or some running costs of the schools themselves, which is not very clear in the budget allocation, or they just have some expenditure guidelines. And now, once we have these tables, what we need to do is to come back on the national account framework to be able to link all resource and expenditure to make sure all the funds we're talking about exactly where they went. And if there is any discrepancy, we have to justify either it's leakage or it's just misrecord of the information, or the issues we have to look at deeper to be able to make a decision on why it was missing. And now one other thing is, most of the time the way they account money at the school levels are not the same as at the ministry level, which means sometimes for one fiscal year, the resource may be different from the expenditure because they carry forward some expenditure from one year to another one, and this also is reflected in the methodology. And once we have this consolidation, we put all together now to calculate the financing indicators we have, mainly in finance, to look at the percentage of expenditure or public expenditure going to the education system, or percentage of GDP as education expenditure, and some other benchmarking we want to calculate. And after saying that, I just want to clarify one thing about the questions Zara mentioned. For the credibility of the data, we can only talk about the data we have collected it ourselves in a team. And that was designed according to the standards of the National Bureau of Statistics, Ministry of Education, and so also some statistical principles we have. And all the data comes from official source, which was extracted exactly from the information management system, financial information management system they have, or integrated financial management system. And for the local education groups, they were involved at the beginning, because before we started, what we did during the financial mechanism analysis, we visited all funding units, including development partners in the country. We worked also with the working sector group. But I think this also is one question we have to raise. We always, as development partners or international, claim transparency and also availability of information. But I think we all have to mention it. It's very difficult to get information from development partners, all these countries, especially when it comes to off-budget. In Uganda, we had an example where the government refused to take the off-budget contribution the development partner was given. And I think this is the main question mark for all. Okay, thank you very much.
Claude, we only have 20 minutes left for the Q&A session.
So, yeah, thank you. So I'll ask the following for people are going to answer to be brief in their answers. So I'd like to have a 1 minute answer from you both. Samuel, could you tell us what UBOS is doing currently in order for the validation processes to be able to before publishing the report, what UBOS is currently doing for the validation of NEA? Quickly, please.
Okay, thank you, Claude. To begin with, the UBOS is the National Statistical Office, as the National Statistical Office, has to validate all statistics that is produced as a national statistics of Uganda. It has to clear whether it is from another ministry, a department, or agency. So I think what they're doing is like fulfilling their mandate of clearing. What we're doing is fulfilling the mandate of clearing statistics before it is presented as a national statistics. But this clearance process will really be looking at basically methodology, what was followed in preparing the NEA. If it was a survey, what was the method followed, what were the standards followed, and also looking at the the data compared with other available data, whether they are in line. It's just as brief as that. Looking at if we look at household survey, because there may be some adjustments done in either way, maybe at the NEA or at UBOS. So how is it just a fight? It's just looking at those few things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. I have another question for your colleague, Nelson. Nelson, there is a question asking, it is specific for Uganda. The question says, mostly the financial resources are from the central government. How do you link that with the EMIS system? Do you have something on that? The question is from Gulam Nabi.
Thank you so much, Claude, for the question. Yes, it is true that most of the funds are from the central government, and they also go to local governments as grants and so on. Now, your question is how to link these central government funds to EMIS. I think EMIS, first of all, is an education management information system, and therefore it is not a financial management system. That I should clarify that part. But it is the funds that help us to set up the education management information system. So in a way, we have not developed a module within education management information system on financing and so on. I think if we had this module, which you remember when I was presenting, that one of the challenges or the requirements would be to introduce a financial module within education management information system so that we can be able to track these financial flows from the center to local governments. Claude, I think that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a question. We're going to go to the second group of questions. Now, these are questions that are related to the use of the data produced by NEA in terms of analysis and some specific analysis on some thematic questions. So there's a question from Plan International, Plan Ireland. Sorry, the question says, Plan International is implementing a regional education project in West Africa called EQUIP, being equity, inclusion, participation, advocacy. So the question says, speaking about what are the funds being spent on, I would like to raise on the inclusion component, how allocation of funds are being planned to the activities addressed to children with disability. I think Usman can take that, and maybe I can also complement his response. Usman, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Claude. I think about all this expenditure tracking, we have one tool. NEA itself cannot track and say where the money goes exactly when it comes to the strategic plan objectives or programs. But where it can help is when you have your plan, it has a, let's say, a broad goal and objectives. You have activities, you have programs, and also the funds you are allocating or you budget for these activities and some indicators, some performance indicators. And after now developing your national education account, it can show you exactly on which of these objectives your money was spent. So you can only know how much is spent on a specific objective, which means in your strategic plan, if you don't have any strategy for children, for example, the NEA would not be able to show it. And as we were saying, you have to make sure in these 5 dimensions we was talking about to have one dimension related to your strategic plan objectives. And it will also require to have a budget-based program, which is not the case for many countries, to be able to track how much money was spent and used for each programs from the funding units to the education institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Usman. Maybe in addition to that, I'll say that the NEA exercise produces a vast array of data, and those data can be used to monitor or track expenditure on some specific group of beneficiary. I'll give an example. In Uganda, the NEA exercise we just concluded there. There is, you can see specifically how much the government is spending on special education. So these are special programs under primary and secondary schools for children under special needs. So I think when there is a need to focus on such specific group of beneficiary, there is possibility during data processing to go into details for expenditure related to the question of interest. Thank you.
I just want to add.
Said, you want to add something?
Yeah, but just to say that in the context of the project, we had 3 who try to address equity and efficiency issues. That two countries, Guinea and Zimbabwe, worked on the allocation of resources. So it doesn't go to as detailed as in how much is allocated to disabled children or minorities, but I think it would be good maybe to share some information there after the meeting on the experience of the stream that aimed at studying resource allocation in the case of Guinea and Zimbabwe.
Yes, yes, Saeed, that's true. And I would like to jump quickly to a question related to that. Someone asked a question about the dissemination of NEA methodological guideline in the country reports. So the question is from Enid Christophine Anze, and he wants to know, no, she wants to know, sorry, how and when those reports are going to be shared to the world, I would say. Saeed, you from the UIS managing the publication of the reports, can you say something on that?
Yeah, I'm doing it in muting. Yes, I am unmuted. Finally unmuted. Yes, I'm happy to respond to that question. So the NEA methodological guide is finalized. We are expecting to have the printed copies within 2 or 3 days. It's completely finished, and we have also a report that we are working on a nice visual report that presents the result of the project that we are working on, that will be disseminated by the end of the month. But the methodological guide itself is finalized, and we are in the process of preparing the dissemination. So the work is entirely completed.
Yeah, just also to add, for Laos, Senegal, and also Uganda, the reports are also available since it was already disseminated at country level. If you contact the country team, you can get it, or you contact us directly, you can send it. And we will try to put it on our website also to be able to make it available for all. Thank you.
Many thanks for the clarification. So there are questions regarding capacity building and the institutionalization of NEA exercise. I don't know who's more appropriate to respond to this, but I think I would like to hear something from the technical team, international technical team that supported the work, and also some experiences from the countries, in Nepal and Uganda. So the questions are from Mustafa Shehu. There are two questions, but they are quite related. The first says, I think it's also good that the GPE Secretariat and all those concerned should build capacity of states, governors, and other key stakeholders in Nigeria to know the impact of education financing. The second question says, most IDPs, I mean, it's international development partners, train mainly the technical officers, forgetting the politicians. And since the politicians are when the politicians are not trained on these regards, they don't support the process after. This is evidenced from the fact that immediately after a project supported by an IDP, the project wind down, not much effort could be seen in scale up by the government. So I think this is something related to capacity building. If there is going to be a continued activities after this NEA to help countries implement in more at country level, but also a question of institutionalization. How do we ensure that after the NEA, even in countries that have already conducted NEA, we continue producing or conducting the exercise, or having the backup of not saying politicians, but our governments, not only technicians. Thank you. Usman, can you give quickly a response regarding the capacity building? I think I would also like to hear from Raphael if GPE is thinking of continuing activities on this NEA, and maybe Nepal and Uganda could tell us how they are handling the institutionalization issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Claude. So about the capacity building, I think it was one of the objectives of this project, and that's why we designed it in a way that we had a technical team, national technical team, which basically in some countries they didn't have even any idea of national education account, and become right now very, very good. I can give example of Laos, for example, and also Uganda or Senegal. And right now, the strategies they have at technical level is to train all the ministry staff or all the government staff at central and local level to be able to sustain this culture of developing national education account. Now, about politicians, I mean, these questions was also asked when it was disseminated the NEA in Senegal. But it's very clear that the objective is not to train from a technical point of view the politicians. Of course, they have to be part of the debate. They have to be part of the process. And that's what we did when we was studying the financing mechanisms. The first step to engage all stakeholders, the civil society, the leaders, and the institutions. But the culture of using national education account to make decisions, it's a tool we have to use to make decisions. And on that part, I think is where maybe country also have to have an internal debate. And most of the countries we work on, the MPs, member of parliament, was involved on the whole process, and they attended in disseminations in Uganda, in Senegal, and in Laos. And now in Laos, they even translate the report into Laotian, and they will present it to the National Assembly to be able to advocate for more funding, because they just discovered that only 3.6% was spent on education as percentage of the GDP, while the country was committed to be at least at 4 to 6%, almost 6%. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Usman. Maybe a few words from Uganda, because I know the exercise in Uganda was quite heavy in terms of human material resources. So how do you think Uganda is going to be managing the institutionalization issue? Because I know even before when the project started, there were discussions regarding are we going to include the higher officials in the national team? Are we going to only to have a team of technicians? And after that, also the question during the final presentation validation workshop, questions were raised regarding who is going to take in charge the follow-up of the exercise. Maybe you both and Nelson from the Ministry of Education, can you say something about that? Thank you.
Claude, thank you very much for that question. The question of ensuring that NEA continues, I think I talked about it. One is that we have tried as much as possible to ensure that everybody in the ministry is aware of NEA. All our politicians, our political heads, the permanent secretary, they are quite aware of NEA, even including our new minister who has just come in. She is quite aware of this NEA, and she has appreciated the concept of NEA. And as I have told you, that we've tried as much as possible, and we shall include in every questionnaire that we or exercise that we do in the field, whether through our own monitoring systems, because many of our departments are always in the field and they carry out exercises. We're trying to ensure that whenever they are getting out, we shall be sharing with them questionnaires questionnaires, so that they can be able to get some information for us from institutions, that we can continue updating our NEA in the country. In the same vein, as we talked last time, we're trying to make sure that we institutionalize within the questionnaires for annual school census. some of the some questions. The only thing is that, of course, it is funding, but we try as much as possible to make it so that some information also filters through that, because we are aware that NEA takes as very massive data and so on. So you have to have a multi-pronged approach to be able to capture as much information as possible. Let me hand over to my colleague from Obos. Maybe he could also say something.
But
Okay.
very quickly, please.
I think he has said it all on the issue of, but on the issue of capacity, first of all, we have a good big team in Uganda, and we shall ensure that this knowledge is passed on to other workmates who may find themselves in the processing, in the work environment of the NEA. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Maybe a few words from Nepal. How did you handle that issue of capacity building and the institutionalization of NEA exercise? Quickly, please. Nepal.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we do hear you.
Okay. I think in terms of capacity building, this is one of the area we have to also concern with. Our experience working with the technical team, some technical members are really good. They can lead the process. But definitely all the technical members were not equally as one. One of the area, that's why the government is expecting at least minimum some kind of technical support from UIS and IAP. This is one of the area they are saying that they want to continue, they like the exercise, but in terms of developing capacity and providing support, maybe like 1 or 2 missions per year, or minimum 2 or 3 missions. With this support, they are also allocated money. So through this exercise, I think they will continue the process. Hello?
Yes, thank you. Claude, do we have...
Hello.
Shall I... You're done, Shalandra?
Yes, I'm done.
I don't think so. Are you done? Okay, thank you.
Claude, do you want me to answer the question?
Sorry?
Do you want me to answer the question on what would be the support of GPE?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
All right, so we've been doing that initial investment through the GRA, Global and Regional Activity Initiative. Now it's coming to an end, but we have 2 ways of financing the setup of NEA at country level through 2 different windows. One is the small technical grant that we call ESPDG, Education Sector Plan Development Grant, and that can be used at country level for making the request to GPE to finance parts or the full establishment of a national education account. And we can also finance that through the larger grant we call SPIG, Education Sector Plan Implementation Grants. So these are like the 2 current mechanisms, but we're also now exploring opportunities and options to have additional financing that would be dedicated to raising data availability and reliability in general. So financial data would be one of the aspects. And we continue being very much engaged at technical level with US and IAP and Pôle de Dakar. We look forward to the publication of the methodological guide and any other follow-up technical products that will be produced, and also all of the discussion between different institutions for looking at interrelations and between different initiatives like Boost of the World Bank and the NEA, or the public expenditure reviews and everything. So we're very much in favor of favoring that collaborative approach around the financial data gap challenges. I'm done, Claude. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raphael. I think we have covered all the questions, and if there is no more question for now, we can close this Q&A session. Any question? Okay, so I'll give the floor back to you, Raphael.
Thank you, Claude, for coordinating that Q&A session, and thank you to the participants for asking great questions and the clarity of the answers by the presenters. I'm wrapping up now. So thank you to the presenters for their presentation. Thank you for the participants. We've been discussing a first overview of what the NEA methodology is, the comprehensiveness of the methodology, and the benefits of developing national education accounts at country level for generating reliable financial data and comprehensive data. We've been also discussing the country experiences of Nepal and Uganda in very practical terms. And I think it was very enlightening to see how the team were formed, what was the process of doing the actual work. And I personally very appreciated the fact that the two national teams stated very openly the challenges faced. But as one can see, apparently there was no challenges that could not have been overcome. And it also comes with a lot of benefits for analytical purposes, for policy dialogue, for informing global data information. Some few points for concluding that session. We have been sharing the presentations in English and French, but we're probably going to send them back to the participants together with the summary of that discussion that will be capturing also the Q&A session. There was also a blog this morning that was released in collaboration with IEP, so check out the GPE website. It's on the Uganda experience in establishing NEA. And speaking more generally about mobilizing domestic resources for education and domestic financing for education in general, the Secretariat of the GPE is preparing a policy brief on the question of domestic financing, and we hope to release that policy brief by mid-September, so stay tuned on this. And also, one last word, we've been recording the session, so when and where possible, we'll be happy to share the recording with anyone who wants it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the presenters, and have a good day for some, and have a good night for others.